Hello ladies and gentlemen of the internet. Today we're going to be taking a look at setting up a Windows 2012 R2 server in GNS3 and then configuring it so it actually performs reasonably well. And what I mean by that is making sure that your VirtIO drivers are loaded for disk and for your network adapters. Otherwise, whenever the KVM hypervisor, which is what those QEMU or QEMU or however you say it, VMs in GNS3, that's the hypervisor they use. So when KVM has to emulate an IDE or a SCSI hard disk or an Intel network adapter, it adds overhead and it makes your VM kind of sluggish. But if you load the VirtIO drivers, the Windows VM actually performs pretty well with reasonably low resources. So what I'm going to do is set one up from scratch. I'm in GNS3 now. I have a blank project here. I'm going to go into Preferences, and under QEMU VMs, you'll notice I have one configured already. We're going to ignore this guy and do one brand new. And I'll call him Windows 2012 R2 example. Use the default binary. I'll give it 4 gigs of RAM. For actually managing the device, we're going to use VNC at least initially. I'll create a brand new image for the hard disk. Default QCal2 format's totally fine. Defaults here, fine by me. I'm going to make it a 40 gig disk. You should be fine with 30, honestly, unless you're planning on having a bunch of stuff running on your guests. But I'm going to do 40 just to be on the safe side. I'll press Finish and Finish again. And I'm going to go and edit this VM. Optionally, if you have a different symbol than the default, you can change that now. I kind of like this workstation image that I found on the internet. So I'll use that. I'm going to give it 2 CPUs. Under hard disk, I'm going to change the disk interface to be VirtIO. Honestly, if I'm saying any of these things wrong, caveat is I'm not a systems guy. I'm obsessed with making things work a little bit smoother for when I'm labbing them out, so I'm not banging my head on the desk. So if I'm getting any of the pronunciation wrong on these Linux technologies that are back and all this stuff, please correct me in the comments below. Under CD and DVD, you can download a 180-day trial ISO direct from Microsoft. I'll be using 2012 R2. You could use 2016. If you have an ISO for Windows 10, this method works for Windows 10 also. Go to Browse, and I have this stored under Storage. And there's the ISO. At this point, it's going to upload that ISO to my GNS3 server. This might take a second. When it hits 100%, you'll see it like bounce down to 0 and then back up to 100% and cycle over and over again. I am reasonably certain that's when it's calculating the MD5 hash of that ISO, since GNS3 creates an MD5 hash of every image that it has. So I'm going to pause the video now until that whole process is complete. Okay, so the ISO for Windows is uploaded and on GNS3. I'm going to come back to the hard drive tab or the HDD tab, and under HDB, the primary slave, I'm going to upload another file. So I'll click Browse. And I'm going to upload this VirtIO AMD 64 VFD. This is a floppy disk image. And I'll leave a direct link to the Fedora project where you can download this floppy disk image in case you don't know how to use Google, I guess. They have an ISO version also that contains a few additional drivers, like a memory bubble or memory balloon driver and a few other things. But for purposes of setting up this server, really all I'm going to load are the VirtIO NIC and disk drivers. So I'll click Open on this. This should upload reasonably fast, and it did. I have to change the disk interface from IDE to floppy. And then under Network, I'm going to change the network adapter type to be para-virtualized network adapter, not the legacy one, but this VirtIO Net PCI interface. I'm going to give it 2 NICs. The reason being is I tend to use these Windows boxes as jump hosts. So I'll have one interface that connects to my local LAN, so I can RDP into that host and then access services that it's hosting, or I pretend that I'm a host on my lab network, so I can test out firewall features and URL filtering, stuff like that. So I'll give it 2 NICs. I'll leave the default name format's fine by me. Go back to the Advanced tab. I'm going to uncheck this box linked base VM right now, because I want to get the install done. We'll sysprep the image, and then we can switch it back to being a linked base. Additionally, I'm going to add in some features, and I'll put these in the description too, or some additional options rather. This usbdevice tablet just makes the mouse performance significantly better over VNC. And then the RTC base equals local time is just to make sure that the clock, the guest's hardware clock, is based off the via the GNS3 server's local time. So I have my GNS3 server is set to Eastern time, and my hardware clock for my guest now will be based off that. You don't have to do that for all your hosts, but the Windows clocks tend to get skewed, which messes up all your Active Directory integration. So I tend to set that here also. And I'm just going to check my settings again. 2 adapters, everything's set VirtIO. That all looks good to me. I'll press OK and apply. And OK again. And I'm going to drag this Windows 2012 R2 example host into my lab. Hey, he shows up. And I'm going to get a cloud interface so I can bridge the second adapter onto my local LAN. And then I'm going to boot this guy up. All right, loading files. And I'll pause the video here until we're actually at the install screen. All right, so we're at Windows Setup. I'll press Next, Install Now. And a little caveat for this. After the install, you'll notice that the Windows guest performs fairly well. During the install, I've noticed that it's a little laggy. But after the install and we get the VirtIO drivers loaded, it's a pretty, I guess, snappy. I don't know what a good way to express that. It's quick. It's responsive once we load it up. So I'll choose Windows Server 2012 R2 Standard Server with a GUI. I'll press Next. I accept these terms, though I have not read them. I'll click on Custom, and then you'll notice, oh no, there's no hard disk, so we have to load driver. I'm going to click Browse, and alright, so it doesn't come up under floppy disk A, but there's a floppy disk B. Okay, so it apparently thinks that the floppy I loaded is floppy disk B. So I'll come into Windows Server 2012 R2, that folder. I'll click OK. All right, I found my drivers. I guess you could theoretically install both of them right now, both the Ethernet adapter driver and the SCSI controller driver. So I'll go ahead and do that. Save a little time after it boots. All right, load driver again, browse, and Server 2012 R2 again. Now we'll load the Red Hat VirtIO SCSI controller driver. I'll press Next again. All right, it found a hard disk. I'll do New and Apply and OK. We'll wait what feels like 30 years. I find that moving the mouse around makes me feel like it's going faster, though it's not. Alright, so it finished, and I'll press next. And then I'm going to pause the video here just because this is boring. So standard sort of Windows setup from this point on. It'll go through, finish its installation, it'll boot up one last time and do its whole finalizing settings, and then it'll prompt me to set up an administrator password. So I will come back once it's prompting me to set up the administrator password. And I'm back. Alright, so it's prompted me to set up an admin password. It really helps if you're typing in the window. Let it finalize my settings, and then we'll go through, do some basic system stuff on there, like disabling the firewall and enabling remote desktop. I'm going to copy some files from my local machine into the VM, and I'll show you how I do that. And then we should be good to Sysprep it and then set it up as a linked base so we can spin up as many Windows 2012 servers as we like. Matter of fact, while that's loading, let me just show you really quick the options that I use. If you go to, so when you open up Remote Desktop in Windows, you can click on this Local Resources tab, and then down towards the bottom, there's this button More. If you click More, you can actually have one of your drives, hard drives, show up as a local resource for the remote desktop connection. And you'll see how useful that is momentarily. Alright, so that bit's done. I'm going to do Control-Alt-Delete. I'll log into this guy. Wait for my desktop to load. First, I'm going to make sure my Red Hat network adapters showed up. That they did. This one should be the one that I use for RDP. So I'll name him that, and then we can leave the other one just labeled Ethernet. I'm going to assign this guy a static IP address. We'll do 172.17.0.200/24 mask, and a gateway, because this is on a different subnet, of 172.17.0.1. I'll press OK there. Let me just make sure I can ping my gateway. Be certain I got the right adapter. Maybe not. Hang tight. Let me see if I can get this. Maybe I got them backwards. Either that, or I use 17.200 for my lab VMs normally. And it could just be a bad ARP entry, since I was doing stuff before I started recording this video. Yeah, that's feeling increasingly more likely. Let's change this back to being DHCP for now. My RDP interface. Let's do 172.17.0.201 just for sake of demoing out how this works. Oh, there's your problem. I have it connected to the wrong interface on the cloud. Hold on. So I need Ethernet 1 connected to ETH2. Alright, let's try this now. There we go. Okay. Sorry about that, everybody. I'm going to change this back to being 200 since that's normally what I use. Okay. That's fine. I'm going to disable Windows Firewall anyway. So, continuing our basic setup here, I'm going to go to local server and Windows Firewall. I'm actually going to turn that off just to make life a little bit easier. It's just a lab computer anyway. And remote desktop, I want that enabled. All that looks good. Other thing I'll do, since I have a high res monitor and it'll be impossible for me to see if I don't do this after I get remote desktoped in, is I'm going to make text or other items larger. Check this box for let me choose scaling for all displays. And I know it sounds crazy, but I normally do like 150% because it's a 4K monitor and I feel like I'm going blind without it. So I'll do sign out now since remote desktop should be working. So we'll do open up a remote desktop connection to 0.200. And I'll connect, use the password that I set up, accept their certificate. Wait patiently. And there we go. This is I'm remote desktoped into the 2012 server running inside GNS3. So a couple other things that I'll do. I'll adjust date and time. We are in Eastern. I'll close this out. Don't need you right now. And then remember, if you remember what I was just showing you a few minutes ago about how you can have one of your local hard drives be a resource over remote desktop, that is where this comes into play. And I'll show you that again here momentarily. Actually, I'll show you right inside the VM, in case you forgot already. Opening up remote desktop connection, I can do show options, click on the local resources tab. Under local devices and resources, click more. And then you check this box for drives on your host computer, your physical machine. And that's how I get my C drive to show up on the remote desktop connection. And then I have some files under SFTP root, like Wireshark, PuTTY, and Firefox. And I'll just drag these over to my GNS3 guest desktop here. Very good. So I'm going to pause the video. I'm going to install Wireshark, Firefox, and PuTTY, and then we'll come right back. Alright, so as you can see, I have Wireshark and Firefox and PuTTY all loaded up on my guest here, and that's all I'm going to do for this VM. So now the last thing we have to do before we can change it back to being a linked base is run Sysprep. We're going to generalize the system, and we're going to go into enter system out-of-box experience. And then I will shut down when that part's complete. So I'm going to probably speed the video up here just to cut over to when Sysprep is complete. Alright, so Sysprep finished running. Remember to check that box for generalize settings there. And then I had it shut down, so I'm being told now that my VNC session is closed. And that should be it. So I'm actually going to delete this out from my lab here. I'm going to go into Preferences, and then under QEMU VMs in my 2012 R2 example, I'm going to click Edit, and I'm going to delete the ISO because we don't need it anymore, so we can pull that out from the CD DVD section. We can do the exact same for the disk image, not the disk image for primary master, but rather the floppy disk image that we had for the VirtIO drivers. And then under Advanced, I'm going to check the box for Use as a linked base VM, and then press OK. I'll click Apply, And then let's drop like a basic Ethernet switch on here. And we'll pull on two 2012 R2 servers. And I'm going to change the host names to SRV1. Change host name SRV-2. And then I'll connect their Ethernet 1 interfaces to the switch. And for giggles, I put the secondary Ethernet. I'll bridge over into my physical network here. And we'll try and power these things on and see how I did. And with any luck, they should boot up, prompting us to set up admin passwords and look like a fresh out-of-box install. This is a good sign. Looks like it's doing our first boot like the OS was just installed. Yeah, getting devices ready. Very good. It's going to reboot after that. Awesome. So we can confirm settings here. All that looks good for me. Press next. I accept. I'll set my admin password for this one. Do the exact same on this server 1. I'll log into both of them. And we'll assign some IP addresses real quick, just so we can test connectivity between the two. I'll make this one 192.168.10.12. And I'll make this one 10.11. Press OK, and then we'll just do a quick test ping. Very good. Make sure our software is all loaded. Yep, there's Firefox. And make sure PuTTY's there. Very good. All right, guys, that's it. As you can see, it's, a couple extra steps, but after you get them installed, I think this is probably the best way to set up your Windows servers inside GNS3. They're significantly more responsive than if you just install with the emulated IDE disk and emulated Intel NIC. So I'll leave some notes in the description of the video and on the blog with these settings that I added on, the additional options within GNS3, and links for downloads to get the Server 2012 R2 trial and the VirtIO drivers from Fedora. So until next time, I hope this video was informative for you guys, and I will see you later.